So at the beginning of this season, fall of 2023, the club suspended him. The Paris Saint-Germain. They told him that we're not going to play you unless you extend. And he refused. And the club president and owner group was furious. And he came out this week and he said that the coach, Luis Enrique, and the basically the general manager, sporting director, they went to the club and they basically allowed it, like they negotiated for him to play this year. And he played this year, but there was some suspicious things where he sat out certain games. Sometimes he got pulled at halftime. And I looking back and based on what he's saying recently, that was probably conceding to pressure because it was never in a meaningful game. But I think that there was internal pressure not to play him and not to, to do certain stuff with him. And so when the coach felt it wouldn't hurt the team, I think he gave in and sat him, and knowing that I'm going to use him for the big games. So he was basically unhappy all year, which is what he said. And so this year, as soon as the season ended, he's now signed with Real Madrid, which is the biggest club in the world. And they just won the Champions League. They lost 2 games all year. So you're and they have an incredibly young core. A guy that I talked about aboard, 20-year-old Jude Bellingham, he's like that. He's on that team.
Yeah.
They have stars upon stars. There's no salary cap. You do whatever the you want when you're Real Madrid. and this is true. Kylian Mbappe is a French player. For the last 7 seasons, he's been at PSG, which is the biggest club in France and one of the bigger clubs in the world. But ever since he was a kid, he's had dreams of playing for Real Madrid. And it's been rumored for a couple of years that he's going to go there. And what he did in this situation, though, is normally in soccer, if you're under contract and another team wants you, they have to pay a transfer fee to the club that you're under contract for. And at one point, Real Madrid had offered $200 million to buy him. And the club said no because they had Messi and Neymar and they wanted to win. And they thought they could, but they didn't. And then what Mbappe did was he signed an extension a couple of years ago and let the extension run down to nothing. So basically, going into this year, at the end of the year, he went to Real Madrid for free. They didn't have to pay any transfer. They just had to negotiate a contract with him. And so his club that turned down the money got nothing for it. So at the beginning of this season, fall of 2023, the club suspended him. The Paris Saint-Germain. They told him that we're not going to play you unless you extend. And he refused. And the club president and owner group was furious. And he came out this week and he said that the coach, Luis Enrique, and basically the general manager, sporting director, they went to the club and they basically allowed it, like they negotiated for him to play this year. And he played this year, but there was some suspicious things where he sat out certain games. Sometimes he got pulled at halftime. And I looking back and based on what he's saying recently, that was probably conceding to pressure because it was never in a meaningful game. But I think that there was internal pressure not to play him and not to, to do certain stuff with him. And so when the coach felt it wouldn't hurt the team, I think he gave in and sat him, and knowing that I'm going to use him for the big games. So he was basically unhappy all year, which is what he said. And so this year, as soon as the season ended, he's now signed with Real Madrid, which is the biggest club in the world. And, they just won the Champions League. They lost 2 games all year. So you're and they have an incredibly young core. A guy that I talked about aboard, 20-year-old Jude Bellingham, he's like that. He's on that team.
Yeah.
They have stars upon stars. There's no salary cap. You do whatever the fuck you want when you're Real Madrid. and this is true. Like they're bringing Mbappe like in his prime at 25 years old. They have basically 5 or 6 core guys that play all the time that are under 25. They're under his age. And they've signed the newest Brazilian sensation who's a 17-year-old who's going to come to the club as well at the same time as Mbappe. I don't know where they're going to play all these guys, but it's going to be interesting to see. But Mbappe's absolutely thrilled. He's happy. This is what he wanted. He took less money to sign here.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, he's saying all the right things. He wants to come in humble and play and earn his, in his spot, have the year that he thinks he's capable of. And so this is, exciting news. I mean, somebody asked me to put it in context. Rod did. And I was like, this is kind of like Michael Jordan going to the Warriors.
But not KD?
The 73 and 9 Warriors.
But not KD going to the Warriors?
He's better than KD. He's better at football than KD is at basketball.
Oh, yeah?
It's not close.
Not close?
Not close.
That's a pretty
this
big
is
statement.
generational, dude. He's 25 years old. He's already scored more World Cup goals than Pele. He had a hat trick in the final of the World Cup.
So you think this is Jordan in his prime?
This is, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is exciting.
But the only pushback I will give you is because you said like there is a chance that they could still lose because of soccer.
Well, yeah, I mean they're not unlikely to go undefeated.
Like that was a 0% chance that the KD Warriors were going to lose against anybody. And if you ask me, in my opinion, that's against anybody in the history of the NBA, but definitely against that version of the NBA.
They still lost games.
Yeah, but I mean,
here's the difference.
So you're saying you're saying that they will win the championship of that.
They should win every major trophy next year.
That's what I'm saying.
That would be a stunning upset if they didn't.
Okay.
But here's the caveat that you got to have. The NBA playoffs, it's 7-game series.
Mm-hmm.
Soccer, you have either a 2-legged tie, home and away, and that's it, or you have like a one-off final, which is 1 game.
Yeah.
So I mean, in reality, anything could happen in 1 game. You know that, you have to accept that. And I mean, again, you're also operating in a world where the other teams don't really have salary caps or restrictions either, and there's a couple of other monstrous teams out there.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no doubt they're the favorite to win everything.
Okay.
And then today he played for France in a tune-up for Euro 2004. He had a goal and 2 assists. France won 3-0. France is going to be among the favorites to win the Euros, which start next week.
What's up with France, man? They're putting some like top level athletes out there.
They have a lot.
The Frenchmen.
They have a lot of like African immigrants.
Yeah.
And that's what you have. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, it was kind of like when they won the World Cup in 2018, the majority of the team had ties to Africa. And people like half jokingly said this is the first World Cup for Africa.
But even, I mean, but traditionally that hasn't been the case. I mean, you still have African immigrants, right? I mean, is this the first? This is, to my knowledge, this is the first influx of like this level of athletes coming from France. Because Wemby's a Frenchman, right?
Wemby's French.
And then you got
had a
Mbappe.
couple in the past. Like you had Tony Parker, Boris Diaw, Michael Pietrus.
Those guys ain't these guys.
No, they're not. But they were athletes.
They
were
real athletes.
Because again, and you go back to that time when those guys came in the league. The typical European player was a
German,
white guy, Dino Raja or somebody like that. And
German.
it's like French, some of the French guys did this. Now there's like a long, complicated history of race in France as well. I mean, there's a thing where, like when you score a goal, you're a Frenchman. When you miss a penalty, you're a Cameroonian or wherever the hell you came from. That is real. I mean, racism in soccer is prevalent and massive.
And I didn't know that, right?
And I want to add to this too. Like, there's another couple things that have to be considered. At one point, his club that he's just leaving, PSG, Paris, the biggest club in France, their academy, like charges and a suit was brought up because they had race quotas in the academy.
Like they had to meet.
They would not have more than a certain amount of black players.
Oh wow!
But we had Darnell on the show a long time ago.
Yeah.
He talked about like if you look at like one of the like racially integrated European countries, of which France, England, Netherlands, like if you look at their national team and it's a bunch of white guys, that tells you that there's a problem in the gatekeeping to get to that level. Because when it's not, when it's even close, this is what you get.
Yeah.
It's just a sporting reality.
Yeah.
And so I mean that's what you have. But also, I mean, like, you kind of go to the next level, like the suburbs of Paris, which is where Mbappe comes from, and many of their top players, like that is like, that's like South Florida for football, or whatever. That's the place where people are developed, and there's just a ton of talent that comes through there. There's a ton of talent that comes through there, and like the French team is so loaded that there's dudes that grew up in Paris but could play for other countries and end up playing for other countries because they could play. and they're not going to make the regular French team.
Wow.
I mean, that's how
loaded
it is.
they are.
They are loaded.
That's crazy.
Like like they made the final in the World Cup in 2022, lost to Argentina, but there was like there was things where like this would be like you created out of the other teams. There were other French teams. There was like a whole other French team of guys that could have qualified to play for France, like because they basically grew up there, but played for other countries and were big players for those teams.
Exactly. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And also like that's. A lot of people were asking, like, how was Embiid able to qualify to play for France or USA? But, being from Cameroon and the French, like you just said, that the France, being immigrated into France.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do it. Like Mbappe, for example, his father's Cameroonian, his mother, I believe, is Algerian.
Yeah.
And, but, and he, at one point, here's a story of, like, not getting things done. At one point, he was very young. His father spoke to Cameroon about him playing for the Cameroonian national team, and they wanted him to pay.
At what age are you thinking?
Like probably 16, 17.
So he was already.
Oh yeah. When he was 17, he was in the Champions League scoring goals for Monaco.
Yeah.
Like this is a prodigy.
Yeah.
But yeah, they wanted him to play. For there, and he's like, hell no, we'll go play for France. And then basically 2 to 3 years later, he's a World Cup champion.
Yeah.
2018 at 19 years old, scored in the final. I mean,
so they messed that up.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah.
Oh man. Maybe they'll get it right next time. Come on, Cameroon.